You get the job offer, you see the number, maybe it is $45,000. And your first thought is probably, I got the job, I don't want to ruin it by asking for more. That feeling is exactly what makes negotiating difficult. But asking professionally for better compensation does not mean you're being difficult. It means you're having a conversation about the value of the role before you agree to it. And there is one psychological mistake you should avoid immediately. Do not negotiate against yourself. If the employer offers you $45,000 and you were hoping for $48,000, don't immediately say, okay, $45,000 is fine. You haven't even asked a question yet. Instead, pause and say something like, thank you, I'm really excited about the opportunity. Is there any flexibility in the salary? Then stop talking. Seriously, don't immediately fill the silence. People often get nervous when there is a pause, so they start explaining themselves, lowering their own number, or saying things like, but honestly, I'm happy with whatever. You have just negotiated against yourself. Let the other person answer. Before you ever have the conversation, though, you need to know what you're negotiating for. Research the typical salary range for that specific role in that location with your level of experience. Then decide on 3 numbers. Your ideal number is what you would love to receive. Your target number is what you realistically want to negotiate toward. And your minimum acceptable number is the lowest offer you would genuinely accept. Keep that minimum private. Do not tell the employer, I'll take anything above $42,000. You have just given them your floor. Instead, go into the conversation knowing your numbers so you don't make an emotional decision in the moment. And here's where psychology becomes really useful. Don't make the negotiation about what you need. I need more money because rent is expensive might be completely true, but it isn't a strong reason for an employer to increase your salary. Make the conversation about the role and the value you can bring to it. For example, based on my research into similar roles and the responsibilities involved, I was hoping we could discuss a salary closer to $48,000. That's completely different. You're not saying, please give me more money. You're saying, based on the role and the market, here's the level of compensation I'm asking you to consider. And that difference matters, because your first salary isn't just one paycheck. It can influence future raises, future job offers, and the number you use as a reference when your career progresses. So don't be afraid to have the conversation. You don't need to be aggressive. You don't need to act like you're some corporate mastermind. You just need to be prepared, calm, and willing to ask. Once you know the number you want, the next question is simple. What are you going to say when they ask why? This is where a lot of people make a mistake. They start listing personal reasons. My rent is expensive. I have student loans. I really need the money. Those things may be true, but they don't explain why the employer should pay you more. Instead, give them evidence that connects you to the value of the role. Think about what the employer actually needs from the person they're hiring. If the job involves dealing with customers, talk about your communication skills and situations where you've handled people effectively. If the role requires organization, explain how you've managed competing tasks, deadlines, or responsibilities. If you have relevant work experience, training, qualifications, projects, or measurable results, bring those up. You're essentially answering one question: why should we pay this candidate more than the original offer? And here's a psychological trick that makes your argument much stronger. Don't just describe what you did, explain the result. Instead of saying, I have experience working with customers, you could say, in my previous role, I regularly dealt with customers and learned how to handle problems calmly and professionally. The second statement gives them something they can actually value. Another useful technique is to let the employer's own job description work for you. Before the interview, highlight the responsibilities they care about most. Then match your experience to those exact requirements. If the job description says they need someone who can manage deadlines, communicate clearly, and work independently, those are the areas you want to prepare examples for. Now, your negotiation isn't based on a vague statement that you're worth more. You're showing that you already have qualities the company specifically said it needs. And here's where another psychological principle comes in. Specific numbers are more persuasive than vague numbers. If you say, I was hoping for a bit more, the employer has no idea what that means. If you say, based on my research and the responsibilities of the role, I was hoping we could get closer to $48,000, they have something concrete to respond to. You also don't need to apologize for making the request. Avoid saying, I'm sorry, but could you maybe possibly increase it? You haven't done anything wrong. Try, I'm very interested in the position, and I'd like to discuss whether there's flexibility in the salary. That sounds confident without being aggressive, and if they say the salary is fixed, don't assume the conversation is over. Ask, If the base salary can't move, is there flexibility elsewhere in the compensation package? That could mean a signing bonus, additional paid time off, a different start date, professional development support, or another benefit that the employer is actually able to offer, because negotiation isn't about forcing someone to say yes. It's about finding out what is actually flexible before you say yes yourself. Now imagine you ask for $48,000 and they come back with, "We can't go any higher than $45,000. This is where you need to avoid two opposite mistakes. Do not immediately accept because you're nervous, but also do not turn the conversation into a battle over $3,000. Instead, find out why the number cannot move. You can say, "I understand. Is the $45,000 figure fixed for this position, or is there any flexibility based on experience?" That question gives you useful information. If the salary really is fixed, stop trying to negotiate something they genuinely cannot change and move to the rest of the package. Ask, if the base salary is fixed, would there be flexibility with other parts of the offer? Maybe there is a signing bonus. Maybe there is additional paid time off. Maybe the company offers professional training or certifications. Maybe there is a salary review after 6 months instead of waiting a full year. But if they offer a future salary review, do not leave it as a vague promise like, "We'll look at it later." Ask what the review is based on and when it will happen. For example, would it be possible to agree on a salary review after 6 months based on performance? That gives you a specific conversation to return to instead of hoping someone remembers what was said. There is also a psychological principle worth remembering here. The first number in a negotiation can influence the rest of the conversation. That is why you should research the market before the negotiation and, where appropriate, give a realistic salary range rather than throwing out a random number. If you say, "I'm looking for somewhere around $47,000 to $50,000, you've established the area you're trying to negotiate within, but only give a range you would genuinely accept. Do not say $45,000 to $50,000 if you would actually be unhappy with $45,000. And never invent competing job offers, fake salary information, or qualifications you don't have. A negotiation can help you get more money. Getting caught lying can cost you the entire opportunity. Finally, remember that walking away is also part of negotiating. If the salary is too low, the hours are unreasonable, or the overall package doesn't work for you, you can politely decline. Your first job does not have to be perfect, but you should understand exactly what you're agreeing to before you accept it, because the strongest position in a salary negotiation isn't being aggressive. It's knowing your value, knowing your alternatives, and being completely comfortable saying, "Thank you, let me think about it." So you have the offer in front of you, you've asked for more, and now you know what the employer is actually willing to change. Before you accept, look at the entire package, not just the salary. A $48,000 salary with poor benefits, a long commute, and no flexibility could be less valuable to you than a $46,000 salary with better benefits, paid training, and a shorter commute. So write down the things that matter to you and compare the offers properly. Then, if the salary is still below your target, make one final, clear request. You could say, "I'm very interested in accepting the position. Based on the responsibilities of the role and my experience, would you be able to move the salary to $48,000? Then stop. Let them answer. If they say yes, great. If they say no but offer something else, decide whether that makes the overall package worthwhile. And if they genuinely cannot move the offer, you now have a choice. You can accept it because it still works for you, or you can politely decline. The important thing is that you made the decision after understanding your options, rather than accepting immediately because you were afraid to negotiate. And remember something important about your first salary. You are not expected to walk into your first job and negotiate like a corporate lawyer who has been doing this for 20 years. You are simply having a professional conversation about compensation. Be respectful. Know your research. Have a specific number. Explain the value you bring. Don't reveal your minimum unnecessarily. Don't bluff. And don't talk yourself down because you're nervous. Your first salary is not just about the money you receive this month. It becomes part of the starting point for your career. So when the offer arrives, don't just ask yourself, "Am I lucky to have this job?" Ask, "Is this a fair offer for the role, the market, and what I bring to it?" Then negotiate calmly, because sometimes the difference between accepting the first number and simply asking one good question can be worth thousands of dollars.